Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are taking a deep and detailed look at what many are calling the most dramatic turning point of the entire conflict, the day Crimea was said to have fallen back into Ukraine's hands. This is a full breakdown of how that moment unfolded, why it mattered, and what it could mean for the future of the region. While facts on the ground can evolve quickly, the events of this day reshaped perceptions, strategies, and expectations on all sides. For years, Crimea had been viewed as one of the most secure and heavily defended regions under Russian control. It was not just a piece of land, but a symbol of power, influence, and permanence. Any suggestion that this control could be challenged was often dismissed. That is why the developments of this day shocked observers across the world and forced a complete reassessment of what was considered possible. The lead up to this moment did not happen overnight. It was the result of months of pressure, strategic planning, and carefully timed actions by Ukraine. Rather than relying on one massive offensive, Ukraine focused on weakening systems, disrupting logistics, and creating uncertainty. Each small move added stress to Russian defenses, slowly stretching them thinner across the region. In the days before the turning point, reports suggested increased Ukrainian activity around key supply routes and military positions connected to Crimea. These actions were not random. They appeared designed to isolate the peninsula, limit reinforcements, and reduce the ability of Russian forces to respond quickly. The goal was not just damage, but control of the situation. On the day itself, everything seemed to change at once. Information began circulating about rapid developments across multiple locations. Communication disruptions, sudden withdrawals, and unexpected movements created confusion. What stood out was not a single dramatic image, but the speed at which events unfolded across the region. Russian defensive positions, once believed to be stable, appeared under immense pressure. Some units reportedly pulled back to avoid encirclement, while others struggled to maintain coordination. This breakdown in cohesion was critical. In modern warfare, losing control of communication and timing can be more damaging than losing territory. Ukraine's approach on this day reflected a broader evolution in its military strategy. Instead of overwhelming force, it emphasized precision, timing, and psychological pressure. Each action sent a message that control was no longer guaranteed, and that assumptions about Crimea's security were outdated. As the situation developed, global attention intensified. Analysts, governments, and media outlets all tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Was this a temporary setback, or the beginning of a deeper shift? The lack of clear information added to the tension, as each new update seemed to challenge long-held beliefs. The psychological impact of these developments cannot be overstated. For Ukrainian forces and citizens, the moment represented hope and validation after years of resistance and sacrifice. The idea that Crimea could be contested again carried enormous emotional weight, even beyond the battlefield. For Russia, the moment raised difficult questions. Crimea had been presented as untouchable, a cornerstone of strategic identity. Any sign of losing control, even temporarily, risked undermining confidence at multiple levels, from soldiers on the ground to decision makers far from the front lines. One of the most significant aspects of this day was how it highlighted the importance of logistics. Crimea's connection to external supply lines had always been its strength. When those lines were pressured or disrupted, the entire defensive structure became vulnerable. This reality became impossible to ignore. Throughout the day, reports pointed to rapid Ukrainian advances into previously inaccessible areas. Whether through direct movement or strategic positioning, the effect was the same. Control of space, even briefly, altered the balance and forced reactions rather than planned responses. The international response was cautious but intense. Allies of Ukraine monitored developments closely, aware that such a shift could redefine diplomatic and military strategies. At the same time, calls for restraint and verification reflected the seriousness of the moment and the risks of escalation. What made this day particularly significant was not just what happened, but what it suggested. It challenged the idea that territorial control in this conflict was static. Instead, it reinforced the view that the situation remains fluid, shaped by decisions, timing, and adaptability. The role of intelligence was central to these developments. Accurate information, real-time analysis, and coordination allowed Ukraine to act decisively when opportunities emerged. This level of integration marked a clear contrast to earlier stages of the conflict. Another key factor was morale. Momentum in warfare often depends on belief as much as firepower. On this day, belief shifted. Ukrainian forces appeared emboldened, while Russian units faced uncertainty about orders, support, and outcomes. Civilians in and around Crimea also felt the effects immediately. Uncertainty about control created anxiety, disrupted daily life, and highlighted the human cost of strategic shifts. Even without large-scale destruction, the psychological toll was significant. As the hours passed, narratives began to form. Some described the day as a collapse, others as a tactical withdrawal, and still others as a temporary adjustment. The truth likely sits somewhere in between, shaped by perspective and incomplete information. What remains clear is that the events of this day forced a global reassessment of Crimea's future. No longer could it be discussed as a settled issue. Instead, it re-entered conversations as a contested space with an uncertain trajectory. Ukraine's messaging emphasized resilience, patience, and strategic clarity. Rather than declaring final victory, the focus remained on long-term objectives and continued pressure. This approach helped maintain credibility and manage expectations. Russia's response focused on control and stability, stressing that the situation was being addressed. At the same time, visible efforts to reinforce positions suggested recognition of the seriousness of the challenge. Military experts quickly began analyzing lessons from the day. The importance of adaptability, layered defenses, and secure logistics stood out. So did the risks of overconfidence in static positions. The day also highlighted how modern conflicts are shaped by perception. Images, reports, and narratives traveled faster than troops, influencing public opinion and political calculations in real time. For Ukraine, the possibility of Crimea falling back into its orbit carried both opportunity and responsibility. Managing such a shift would require not only military success, but governance, security, and international coordination. For the wider world, the events served as a reminder that conflicts labeled as frozen or settled can change suddenly. Strategic patience, combined with innovation, can open doors once thought closed. As night fell, the situation remained dynamic. Some questions were answered, while many more emerged. What was clear was that the day had altered the conversation around Crimea in a fundamental way. In the aftermath, attention turned to what comes next. Would this momentum continue, or would defenses stabilize? Would negotiations be influenced, or would fighting intensify? These questions remain open. The long-term significance of this day may not be fully understood for years. What can be said now is that it marked a shift in perception, strategy, and possibility. Crimea, once seen as firmly locked into one future, was suddenly viewed through a different lens. That change alone carries immense weight. In examining this day, it becomes clear that history is shaped not only by decisive battles, but by moments that challenge assumptions. This was one of those moments. Whether described as a fall, a breakthrough, or a turning point, the events forced everyone watching to reconsider what lies ahead for Crimea and the broader region. As the situation continues to evolve, one lesson stands out. In modern conflict, control is not just about territory. It is about momentum, belief, and the ability to shape events at critical moments. This day, above all else, demonstrated that the future of Crimea is still being written. The story is not over, and the outcome remains uncertain. What is certain is that the events of this day will be studied, debated, and remembered as a moment when the narrative shifted and new possibilities emerged. And that is why many now refer to it as the day Crimea fell back to Ukraine, not only as a statement of control, but as a symbol of how quickly history can turn when strategy, timing, and determination align.